Finally, time for the very first Your Season is Over list of the 2021 college football season. Now that week one is completely and entirely and officially too in the books. This week and last week has been a little bit unusual as far as the schedule on the channel goes because you had games being played on all different types of days. So normally I do this video on Sundays every week during the season, except for week one, because I always wait on the Sunday and Monday night games and then do this video on Tuesday. Today's Tuesday, so here I is with your official Your Season is Over video for week one. Here's the public service announcement disclaimer that I do multiple times throughout the season for people that may be new to YouTube. Showing up on the Your Season is Over list, it has nothing to do with quote unquote your season being over. The Your Season is Over video, it's just a video where I talk about the teams that lost. That's all it is. It's just called the Your Season is Over list. Instead of making a video every Sunday where I talk about the teams that won, I make a video where I talk about the teams that lost. So that's where this video originated. That's where the name came from. So there's going to be some teams on this list, and even though I'm saying this now, because it happens all the time, there'll be people in the comment section saying, such and such season ain't over. How's their season over after one loss in week one? The season, of course, the season's not over. Figure it out, okay? Figure it out. The other thing is, I did the Tool music on Sunday with the intro. And you know what? I think I'm going to do that from now on. I think on Sunday morning, first thing Sunday morning, I'm going to make a little 2 or 3 minute video where I reveal the teams that are on the Your Season is Over list. That video will have the Tool music, the eulogy song by Tool in it, like, you know, everyone's used to hearing with the Your Season is Over video. I'll upload that, and then I'm going to just upload this, the talking portion. Believe it or not, there are some people out there who get irritated with the quote unquote, your intros are too long. They're not really intros, they're part of the video, but I get it, so I'm probably going to separate that now. After doing it that way, it's Sunday, and now doing this today, I said, you know what, maybe I just do that every week. So upload just a 2 or 3 minute kind of like teaser video where I reveal, okay, these are the teams that will be featured in today's Your Season is Over video. You know, stack the helmets up or something like that, like I did on Sunday. Upload it, and then immediately start recording this part of the video that you're watching now and upload that separately. Anyway, let's get on with it. Up first today, you know where we have to start, Tater Man. I do apologize. That y'all got humiliated by my Georgia Bulldogs. But you did, and now your season is over. So, you're going to go 11-1 because look at the ACC, which more on that. I could have just put the ACC on the Your Season is Over list. What a terrible weekend for the ACC. We'll talk about that some more in a little bit, but let's devote some time to Clemson. I feel like they've earned it, and they deserve it, don't you? 8 months of Georgia's got no chance in this game. Georgia's going to lose. Georgia's going to get destroyed. Clemson this, Clemson that. The ukulele had 800 yards in his 2 games last year. Clemson's defense, whatever that freshman running back's name is that y'all thought was going to have 1 million yards, all this kind of stuff. Georgia come out and won the game. Was it a pretty game? No. Was there a lot or any offensive fireworks in the game? No. This was an old school sort of defensive struggle. You have 2 top 5 teams squaring off in week one. And, you know, they say the biggest improvement in college football takes place from week 1 to week 2. And if you watched a lot of college football this weekend, you saw a lot of offenses struggle against teams with defenses nowhere near as good as UJ or Clemson. So do I think Clemson's a terrible team? No. The polls come out today, I guess, the coaches in the AP poll. I'll be putting my top 10, my updated top 25 out later this afternoon too. How far down do you drop Clemson? I mean, I do think you have to drop them some because at the end of the day, wins and losses do matter, and the reality is Clemson lost. But man, I know in the world of college football, we love to overreact, but Jesus Christ, the overreaction that's going on about this Georgia-Clemson game is at a whole new level. If you listen to the way people are talking on the internet, neither Georgia or Clemson, either one's going to win another game the rest of the year. They both suck and they're both terrible. Let me ask you this. Over, under, How many more games do you think Georgia and Clemson are going to lose in the regular season combined? I'm going to put the over-under at 1.5. Do you think Georgia and Clemson are going to lose, in other words, 2 games or more the rest of the season combined? So say 1 game each, or one team loses 2. Or would you take the under? I'll take the under. Neither one of these teams is losing 2 games. I doubt either of these teams loses another game in the regular season. These were 2 really good teams. The Clemson man is complaining about the play calling. I get it. You lose a close game, there's always going to be some complaining. Well, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? I get that. I've done the same thing as a Georgia fan. When we've lost games in the past, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we play this guy more? Sort of Clemson man out here running around talking about, we abandoned the run game. We should have ran the ball more. Yeah, you ran the ball like 9 times for 2 yards total. So, okay, if you would have ran the ball 25 times, maybe you would have had 7 yards rushing. Do you think 5 yards rushing total was the difference in the game? No. Point is, you lost. You got beat by a better team. I mean, that's what happened. Clemson is a great team. Georgia is better. That's just, this year, Georgia's just better than Clemson. I mean, that's just reality. The last 2 weeks, everybody's like, Lou better get the injury excuses ready. I better not hear Lou come on here after Georgia gets humiliated by Clemson and talk about injuries, and that's why they lost. Well, we won with all those injuries. I mean, look at the stat sheet for Georgia and look at who caught passes in that game. They're all freshmen and redshirt freshmen. A walk-on was catching passes. Georgia's top 4 receivers were out, and they're all coming back, including George Pickens. Now, George Pickens probably won't be back until November, but the rest of those guys are coming back this week, next week. I mean, really, really soon. You're talking about Darnell Washington, Dominic Blaylock, Kyrus Jackson. I mean, those are all starters. None of them played. Never mind George Pickens. You had Tyke Smith out on defense, but that didn't seem to matter, did it? Taterman? Hey, Taterman, what do you think about that Georgia defense? So it was a good game, but Clemson, you can't run your mouth for 8 or 9 months and then toe an L week 1 and expect not to hear about it. So sorry for your loss, but Taterman, your season is over. Georgia's just better this year. It is what it is. I mean, let's be real. Clemson and Georgia have played 61 times. Georgia is better almost every single time. Georgia is now 43-18 against Clemson all time. I mean, I shouldn't have been the only one that saw this coming, but, go look through my comment section for the last 8 months. You won't see very many people hyping up Georgia in there. Yeah, a bunch of people telling me we're going to get humiliated and blown out. Of course, all those people are in hiding now and their internet's not working. It's weird. Their Wi-Fi's done gone out. I can't figure it out. Let's move on. I could talk for 2 hours about the Clemson Tater game, but I feel like we've talked about that game a ton already. LSU lost 38-27 to UCLA. Boy, Corn Dog, your season is over. 2 years in a row, you've lost your opening game. Last year, you got blown out by Mississippi State in week 1, and that really derailed your entire season, didn't it? Yeah, it did. That and terrible play. Your quarterback situation was a mess last year before you finally settled on one at the end of the year. And here's the thing about that LSU UCLA game. That wasn't a fluke. That wasn't a fluke. If LSU and UCLA played again today or tomorrow, UCLA would beat you again. They would beat you again. That wasn't a fluke win. They're better than you. They were better than you. LSU's got some issues. And nobody wants to hear this, but their issues honestly start with their head coach. I've never fully bought into Ed Orgeron. Now, I give the man his credit on the national title, okay? He was the head coach, and people say, well, that was Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. Well, who do you think made the decision to bring Joe Brady in? Ed Orgeron. Who made the final decision to get Joe Burrow out of the transfer portal? Ed Orgeron. So I do feel like it's not that I don't think he deserves any credit. He does. He deserves a ton of credit for that national title season. But just look at Ed Orgeron's career outside of that one season, and there's some serious question marks. And I mentioned this a couple of times over the summer, and the LSU people jumped all over me and told me I was an idiot. And for the record, when I do my coach rankings, I usually put Ed Orgeron ahead of Kirby Smart. That's how much value I place on national titles. I mean, there's not very many coaches coaching right now who've ever won a national title. I mean, just name them in your head. Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Ed Orgeron, Mac Brown, Jimbo Fisher. That's it. There's 5 coaches coaching in college football right now who have ever won a national title. It's not easy to do. So it's not that I don't give them any credit at all. I'm just not so sure that, Ed Orgeron, I don't think is a Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney type of thing where it's going to be 5, 6, 7 years of them being at or near the top of the college football world. And so far, that's panned out. 500 record last year. Losing a Pac-12 team? Corn dog, come on. Man, come on. A Pac-12 team. A Chip Kelly team. Woo. Let that sink in. A Chip Kelly team. Let it sink in. And again, it wasn't a fluke. Did you watch the game? 38-27. And again, if they played again tomorrow, who would you bet on to win? I would bet on UCLA. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a fluke. Why can't LSU run the ball? Now, see, that to me, that's the most concerning thing, because say what you want about Chip Kelly, great offense. They ran for a bunch of yards. They got a good offense under Chip Kelly. How is it that LSU can't push UCLA around? LSU had like 45 yards rushing in this game. That's not good against UCLA. I mean, Pac-12 teams in general, I think in general, the Pac-12 is considered the quote-unquote softest conference. And that's not to, I don't use that word necessarily as an insult. I just mean when you look at defensive fronts across college football in the conferences and even secondaries, like they don't play press man in the Pac-12. They play a lot of off zone and stuff like this. It's just not a very physical conference, whereas the SEC is considered the most physical conference, maybe the SEC and the Big Ten. Alarming that LSU got manhandled up front by UCLA. They rushed for 45 yards. That's to me, that's almost worse than losing the game. But LSU, your season is over, and it's probably really over. Even though that's not technically what this video means, it's hard to imagine you beating. If you can't beat UCLA, how many more losses does LSU have? Let's be honest. Texas A&M's most likely a loss now. Bama's most likely a loss now. Hell, right now I would pick Ole Miss to beat LSU. We'll see with Florida. You guys have had their number lately, but LSU, disappointing. Miami, your season's over, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. You got absolutely destroyed. And here's the problem or issue or whatever you want to call it when you're talking about Miami. Just take a look at Miami's schedule. And again, we got the overreaction going on and people, Miami's going 0-12. Miami's not going 0-12. Check the schedule. What you have right now in the ACC is Clemson. And then honestly, after that, a bunch of 7 and 8 win teams. Now, because they all play each other, 1 or 2 of those 7 or 8 win teams is going to win 9 or 10 games because that's what they're playing. Miami is probably going to be one of those teams. Just check the schedule. And did you see the ACC play this weekend? I mean, they've got some serious issues. From North Carolina to Georgia Tech. Louisville got road graded last night. It just hasn't been good. It hasn't been good for the ACC. Clemson lost, North Carolina lost. Those were supposed to be the 2 best teams. Miami lost. That was supposed to be the 3rd best team. It just wasn't good. So you start looking at Miami's schedule. So yeah, I could see a scenario where Miami goes 9-3, 10-2, 11-1, whatever, because there's just not a lot of hurdles to jump over in the ACC. But here's the problem, and this was the case last year with Miami. Miami had a good year last year, right? They had the weird loss to North Carolina where they gave up 1,000 yards rushing in that game. But then they got blown out by Clemson last year, and that's where Miami is right now. Miami is the best of the bad teams in the ACC. That's probably what they are. I'll be honest. I know Virginia Tech is riding high on the hog because they beat North Carolina. If Miami and Virginia Tech were playing tomorrow, I'd take Miami. I'm not overreacting. Alabama's going to beat a lot of teams by 30 and 40 points. We've been watching them do it for a decade. Losing to Alabama by 30 or 40 to me, with Miami's ACC schedule, doesn't equal 0-12 or 6-6. I think Miami can still win the majority of the games left on its schedule. What does that mean? Well, it means they're the best of the bad teams in the ACC. Miami is not even in the same universe as the top 4 or 5 teams in America. We saw it last year when they played Clemson. We saw it this weekend when they played Alabama. And if they played any of the other top 4 or 5 teams, whoever you think those teams are, the result would be similar. There's just a huge talent gap and honestly a coaching gap between Miami and most of the top 4 or 5 teams. That's just the reality of the situation. So Miami can probably get back to 9 or 10 wins again, and maybe even win their division, right? Before getting absolutely destroyed in the ACC title game by Clemson, which is what will happen. So, should Miami fans be jumping off of a cliff? No. You're still going to win probably the same amount of games that most people thought Miami was going to win heading into the season. Whether you lost by 1 to Bama or 100, that doesn't change the fact that Georgia Tech is terrible. North Carolina appears terrible. Louisville is terrible. Wake Forest and Duke are terrible. On and on and on. I mean, when you try to find good teams in the ACC, you find people. I do it. You end up having to make excuses. You have to try to convince people. No, Pitt's good. Pitt's good. Boston College is good. NC State is good. They're good in relative terms. They're good compared to the bottom half of the ACC. These aren't good teams. They're just not. And Miami is the best of that bunch, in my opinion. But I don't know what the average Miami fans' expectations were for this season. I've got no clue. But if it was anything other than losing to North Carolina in the ACC title game, which you still have a chance to do, then your season is over. Miami got absolutely dominated. Bryce Young had 400 yards or something. D'Eriq King turning the ball over like it was his job. 2 interceptions and a fumble for D'Eriq King. Pitiful. Yes, I got my copious notes here. You know how I do. Let's stay with the ACC. North Carolina, your season is over, and so is Sam Howell's Heisman pipe dream. This guy came out and laid an absolute egg, and I don't want to hear any comparisons between that and JT Daniels or DJ Ukulele. JT Daniels and DJ Ukulele each played against a top 5 defense. Virginia Tech ain't no top 5 defense. I'm not on here to knock Virginia Tech. It's a good win for Virginia Tech. Big win for Virginia Tech. But Sam Howell looked absolutely horrible. Losing those 2 running backs and all those receivers that he lost has really hurt him. Now, I don't think Sam Howell is a worse quarterback today than he was last season. I just think without the benefit of a great running game, it makes it a lot easier for teams to focus on Sam Howell in the pass, and he's throwing to a bunch of brand new wide receivers. So, do I expect Sam Howell to play that bad every single game this season? No. I still think North Carolina, again, is probably in the Miami boat. I think North Carolina and Miami are probably good teams. Virginia Tech might be a good team. Maybe even Pitt and Boston College, good teams. Maybe NC State, good teams. Good in that when you look at their records at the end of the year, those are teams that could possibly have 8, 9, or 10 wins against a bunch of terrible ACC teams. Again, all of those teams I just named are miles behind Clemson and the rest of the top teams in the country. But North Carolina just did not look good at all. That was a bad performance. Honestly, and you don't have the built-in excuses that maybe some other teams that had bad performances have. North Carolina honestly should have won that game, and they just didn't show up. Washington, what in the hell? You lost to Montana. Washington was ranked 20th. A lot of people had Washington pegged to win the Pac-12 North. And if you watch the Pac-12 this weekend, the Pac-12 North doesn't exactly look unbeatable. Oregon struggled, but at least they found a way to win. Washington struggled and toted a giant L to a Montana team. I mean, aren't they an FCS team? Wow. Not good at all. I don't know what has happened to Washington over the last few years. When Scott Peterson was there, they were doing okay. They had Jacob Eason. He was slinging the ball around. Scott Peterson retired for what appears to me to be no particular reason at all. And since then, Washington has just lost. And honestly, again, that was a game to me that I'm not too sure was a fluke. Washington honestly looked that bad. Washington's season is definitely over, especially when you look down in the Pac-12 South and you see some pretty good teams like Southern Cal, UCLA, and Arizona State. Utah, to a lesser degree, they struggled some too this weekend. But the Pac-12 South right now, miles ahead of the Pac-12 North. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Georgia Tech, you lost to Northern Illinois, 22-21. Shout out to Sea-Dog. There's no shame in losing to Northern Illinois, is it? Yes, there is. They were winless last year. They're 0-6. This was probably the easiest game on Georgia Tech's schedule, was this game. And they found a way to lose 22-21. So it's not like they got blown out, and they did have a chance to win this game. And unlike some of the other games I've mentioned, I do think if Georgia Tech and Northern Illinois played again today, Georgia Tech would probably beat them. But that doesn't matter. Yeah, you don't play them again today. You played them Saturday and you lost, and that's terrible. But like I said, that probably is the most winnable game. And this is a bad sign to me with Jeff Collins, because this is a severely inferior opponent to Georgia Tech. He's been there 3-4 years now. He has a returning QB that a lot of people liked, myself included. I just said, well, he's got to cut down on the turnovers and he could be okay. Well, he didn't get the memo, because all he did was come out on Saturday and turn the ball over again like he did every single game last year. I like the running back. But to me, this is a troubling sign. This reminds me, in a way, of Tennessee's loss to Georgia State a couple of years ago with Jeremy Pruitt. And he lasted, one more year, and then he was gone. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Jeff Collins. Georgia Tech tends to hang on to their coaches way too long because there's just no real expectation or fan pressure at Georgia Tech to make immediate changes when they're bad. There's just not. The average Georgia Tech fan doesn't know the difference between a football bat and a baseball. They just don't, nor do they care. So I don't know if Jeff Collins could be on the way out another year or two. A couple more losses like this, though, and you got to start thinking about making a change. But that was a disappointing loss for a Georgia Tech team that's had some momentum, at least in terms of recruiting. They've had two of their best classes ever in the last few years there, now that they changed offenses and got rid of the triple option. That didn't look good, though. That didn't look good for the Nerds. It honestly was terrible. Nebraska, now this goes back to week 0. Nebraska did win this past week against something called Fordham. What is a Fordham? I don't know. And again, put that in the category of things I also don't care about, the Fordham. But Nebraska, this goes back to week 0 when they got beat by Illinois. Leading up to that game, and really for a month or so before the season started, when we really started looking at the week 0 games, I said the same thing over and over again, and I heard a lot of other people say the same thing. If you're Nebraska, year 4 with Scott Frost, year 4 with the same starting quarterback, Adrian Martinez, and you're not in a position in year 4 where you can beat Illinois in your first game, when Illinois got a brand new coaching staff, then you really got to start looking at what's going on there, and that's what happened. If you can't beat Illinois, then you really start, who can you beat in the Big Ten? Honestly, look at Nebraska's schedule. They got Oklahoma coming up. I mean, Oklahoma will beat them by as much as they want to. If they can't beat Illinois, who in the Big Ten can they beat? This could be a historically bad year for Nebraska. They could be looking at a 3-9 type of season if they don't get something figured out. And Scott Frost has hitched his wagon to Adrian Martinez. I mean, Adrian Martinez, he had a couple of good games his freshman year, honestly. And he had he was injured a little bit during the 4-year period. He looked so bad in that Illinois game. And I'm sitting there going, Scott Frost has been there 4 years, and this is the best he's been able to put out on the field at quarterback is Adrian Martinez. I mean, they had the McCaffrey kid last year. He got irritated and transferred out. He's looking like a genius right about now because for whatever reason, Scott Frost is just married to Adrian Martinez. He refuses to take him out. I don't know if Scott Frost is trying to prove that he's been right this whole time about Adrian Martinez and everyone else has been wrong. But if that's what he's doing, he's not winning that argument. I mean, Adrian Martinez just looked absolutely horrible in that game. Nebraska's season really is over. If you can't beat Illinois, you're not making a bowl game. I mean, that's not happening. I don't know what improvements can be made when you've already got the kid's already in his 4th year as a starter. The head coach and staff are in their 4th year. I don't know what improvements can be made during the season to improve that team from not being able to beat Illinois to then being able to win 6 remaining games on the schedule. I mean, you had all offseason, and you came out week 0, pushed not even a plastic plate, one of those cheap dollar store styrofoam plates. You slid that thing right out onto the field, right in the 50-yard line, right in the middle of the field, hunched down and took a giant doo-doo on it and called it a day. Not good. Nebraska, your season is over. Scott Frost, your coaching tenure at Nebraska could be over. Not looking good for the Cornhusker. West Virginia. I called this one. West Virginia lost to Maryland. A lot of hype. I didn't understand it. Yes, West Virginia had a good defense last year. That defense is gone. So is the coach that ran it. Gone. The offense was terrible, and all those players are back. And so the storyline you kept hearing was, well, the defense might not be quite as good, but the offense is going to be way better. Yeah, I call BS because you got beat by Maryland, and that's pitiful and sad. And honestly, Maryland's not that good. I mean, they got the Pineapple Jr. playing quarterback. So, again, I know the Big 12 is not a juggernaut league, but you start looking around at West Virginia, Oklahoma, lost, Iowa State, lost, Texas, lost, probably TCU, lost. They'll beat Kansas. Shit, is Kansas State a coin flip? Is Kansas State, West Virginia a coin flip? Maybe. Don't you have Pitt coming up too? Doesn't West Virginia play Pitt? You're not going to beat Pitt. Not with what I saw this past weekend. I don't know what y'all are going to do up there. It's going to be a bad year for the Mountaineer, man. They got a lot of couches going to be burning in Morgantown this year. Not good, West Virginia. Wisconsin. This was the preview of the Georgia-Clemson game, wasn't it? Was this game scoreless at halftime? Wisconsin and Penn State. Wisconsin ends up losing. Wisconsin lost this game in the first quarter. Twice in the first quarter, Wisconsin got down inside the Penn State 10-yard line, and both times they came away with 0 points. You can't do that when you're playing a quality opponent, and you definitely can't do that in one of these low-scoring, defensive kind of struggle games, right? And you did it twice in a row in the first quarter, and I knew right then the game was over. But it was an exciting game, a competitive game. Most people knew Penn State was not the team we saw last year. It was sort of a fluky year for Penn State where they started 0-5, then won their last 4 to finish 4-5. So a terrible year overall for Penn State. But if you've been paying attention to Penn State, you knew that was kind of fluky and they weren't going to be that bad. I was a lot higher on Wisconsin than I should have been. I fell for it. I think I had Wisconsin going 12-0 and winning the Big Ten West. I guess technically they still could win the Big Ten West. Penn State's an East team. And look around in the West, not a lot of hurdles to jump over. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan are all in the East. So I guess technically Wisconsin could probably still win that division. We'll see. But they got to get a lot better. They got to get a lot better offensively. Both of those teams really struggled offensively. And now Wisconsin, I do think, has an elite defense. So I feel like Penn State's offense is probably going to be okay in the long run. There's a lot of teams that are going to struggle to move the ball and score points on Wisconsin. I think Penn State's defense is good, but not elite. And so that worries me if I'm a Wisconsin fan because I feel like Wisconsin should have been able to move the ball more on Penn State, and they weren't able to do it. Indiana got blown out by Iowa. Man, and this is one where I'm actually glad this happened. I got tired of hearing all offseason about how amazing Indiana's going to be this year. I got tired of hearing about it. I didn't get it. I know they were 6-2 last year in a weird season, and they beat Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State all in the same season for the first time in program history. But at the end of the day, they're Indiana, and I just refuse to buy into the hype. In Iowa is one of those teams, you don't even have to research them or look into them, They're going to win 8 or 9 games a year, and then on occasion they'll get to 10-2, right? And they play a lot of low-scoring games. They play good defense. They win a lot of low-scoring games, and they held Indiana, I think, to 6 points here. Indiana had 17 starters back from last year's team. A Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback that people wouldn't shut up about, and they just came out and laid an egg. So it didn't bother me that they lost because I've been beating that drum all offseason. I didn't understand the Indiana hype at all. Florida State, I'm not going to bag on Florida State too much. They've been absolutely terrible over the last few years. Did I even write this down? I did write this down. Hold on a second. Florida State, just for some perspective here. In the last 4 years combined, Florida State has 21 wins. Just think about that. 21 wins total in the last 4 years. That's how bad they've been. That's an average of a little over 5 wins a season over the last 4 years. So I don't want to bag on Florida State too bad because they gave Notre Dame everything they could handle and then some. And it was a great storyline with the McKenzie Milton deal. So I don't really want to get on here and bag on FSU, but you lost, and that's the point of this video. You lost. Not only did you lose, you lost in prime time on a Sunday where everybody was watching, so you had to find your way onto this list. But look, Florida State, I think, is clearly better this year than they have been in any of those previous 4 years we were just talking about, where they were averaging 5 wins a year. How much better? Now that I don't know. I don't think Notre Dame is as good this year as they have been the last 2 or 3 years, and I've said that all offseason. In fact, I picked Notre Dame to go 8-4 this year. And they haven't lost more than, I think, 2 games in a regular season in a long time, but I picked them to go 8-4. So I wasn't very high, or at least as high on Notre Dame as some other people were. But with that being said, Florida State did look a lot better than I thought they would. And Florida State has really taken advantage of the transfer portal, too. Boy, that Jermaine Johnson that they got from Georgia, what a game he had on the outside there, outside linebacker, defensive end, whatever they call it at FSU. But FSU is pretty good, but to me anyway, best case scenario, absolute best case scenario for Florida State is that they're Miami. That they're better than all the bad teams in the ACC. That's the best case scenario. If Florida State, again, like Miami, played any of the top teams, they would get absolutely destroyed. I think everyone knows that. So I'm not even saying that as an insult or anything like that. And Florida State's been so bad the last 4 or 5 years, they'd probably be happy to just be the best of the worst in the ACC and win 8 games or something this year. And who knows, it might happen. I think I had them winning 7. I had them losing to Notre Dame, but then I think winning 7 the rest of the way. And from what I saw the other night, that's still definitely a possibility. Florida State could definitely win 7 games this year. Maybe more. We'll see. Maybe more. All right, who won but looked bad doing it? Man, Oklahoma, boy, they escaped with a damn miracle. But here's the thing, if you're Oklahoma, you did this last year too, Oklahoma. Came out in the beginning of the season and looked like absolute crap. And lost. At least this time, you hung on and won. Now, it was against a terrible Tulane team. A Tulane team that had been displaced for the entire previous week because of Hurricane Ida. A Tulane team that had to play on the road in Norman, Oklahoma, when it was supposed to be a home game at Tulane. Again, because of the hurricane. A lot of things working against Tulane. And it didn't seem to bother them. Not one bit. Now, the concerning thing if you're Oklahoma is the defense, and I fell for it. I watched Oklahoma all of last year. The defense was a lot better than it had been in years past. They got a lot of those guys back this year. They kept Alex Grinch again as defensive coordinator. I thought Oklahoma was past what I saw this past Saturday in terms of defense. Watching Oklahoma's defense for the majority of that game, really except the second quarter. I thought Oklahoma played great in the second quarter. First quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, same old Oklahoma defense you've been watching for the last 4 years. It looks like a bunch of people trying to catch a greased pig. That second touchdown run that Tulane had in the first quarter, there was 5 Oklahoma players that just slid off of him like he was covered in grease or baby oil. It's just the strangest thing that it just keeps happening year after year after year at Oklahoma. Spencer Rattler, shaky, some turnovers. I still think Oklahoma's the cream of the crop in the Big 12. Although you got Texas, which we'll talk about in a second, that looked, I think, better than most people thought, at least from the comments I read all offseason. So we'll see. Oklahoma, of course, got better each week last year. They better hope they can do that again this year. And again, if you're an Oklahoma fan, if you're sitting there at 12-0 at the end of the year, and then you win the Big 12 title game and you're 13-0, no one's going to bring up this Tulane game. Because you won it, right? Last year, you lost a couple of those early games, and it was over for you at that point in terms of making the playoffs. So what I saw yesterday or Saturday with Oklahoma did not cost them a spot in the playoffs. No, because you won. It's not that. It's that it's concerning. The things that keep popping up over and over, mainly defensively and Spencer Rattler with the turnovers, are concerning. And you got to get those things fixed, because if you don't, the same thing's going to happen to Oklahoma that has happened every other time they've made the playoffs. I mean, you'll get in and you will get beat by whatever top 4 team you're playing. The defense has got to get it together. Got to get it together. They got to start basic fundamentals, just basic tackling. Iowa State barely escaped Northern Iowa 16-10. Man, all this hype around Iowa State too. They're in the top 10 in every single poll. I had them 6th or something in my poll preseason. 16-10 to Northern Iowa. I mean, there's no excuse for that. There's just no excuse for that. Notre Dame, 41-38 over Florida State. It's great to talk about how good Florida State looked and they played and gave Notre Dame all they wanted and blah, 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 blah. That wasn't an impressive win to me by Notre Dame. Notre Dame is way more talented than Florida State. They're better than Florida State. that shouldn't have happened. You let them hang around, and then they had to come back in the fourth quarter. And really, you were lucky to get out of there with a win with the field goal situation in overtime. You just were extremely lucky to get out of there with a win. Not impressive. Oregon, probably the least impressive win, 31-24 over Fresno State. I guess that's more impressive than 40-35 over Tulane. But I'm officially, I think, done with the Oregon train that I've been on for the last 2 seasons. I was on Oregon last year. I thought they were going to be great. And then to come out early in the season. And the thing is with Oregon, even the games they win, they look terrible. Oregon won a couple of games early last year that they should have lost or could have lost. And then to come out this year and doing the same thing. It's concerning. Mario Cristobal is a great recruiter. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's game prep. I don't know if it's development. I don't know if it's play calling or schemes. I don't know what it is. But there's way too much talent at Oregon to be putting this on display against teams like Fresno State. Kayvon Thibodeau goes down, and man, I hated to see that. He's probably the best player in college football. He'll be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, in my opinion, next year. He is. I know y'all. A lot of people don't watch Pac-12 football. I hope he's not done for the year. I hope he can play this week at Ohio State. I mean, because, that's just a big game. I don't think he's the difference in whether they win or lose. It's just when you watch a big game like that, you want to see everybody play, especially the best players. So we'll see. He's listed as day-to-day with a sprained ankle. Honestly, right now, I'd be surprised if he played. Sprained ankles are hard to get over, at least in a week's period. Who won and looked good? Of course, Bama. We talked about that. Destroyed Miami. Georgia. Maybe they didn't look good, at least offensively, but it's a good win. So good wins and bad wins. So we talked about the bad wins, Oklahoma, Oregon, Iowa State, whatever, Notre Dame. Good wins, Bama, that's a good win. I mean, what is Bama supposed to do? Oh, it's Miami. Okay, all you can do is play who's on the schedule. I mean, Alabama drug them for 4 complete quarters. What else can you do when you're playing a terrible team? Georgia. They won. They beat a top 4 team, a quote-unquote big game. Kirby can't win a big game. Never mind the fact he's won SEC championship games, playoff games, New Year's Six games, top 10 matchups against teams like Florida and Auburn. But never mind all that. He can't win a big game. Georgia found a way to win in an ugly game. Clemson didn't find a way to win. Dabo didn't find a way to win. Dabo got outcoached. Dabo got outcoached by Kirby Smart. So everybody that's all, Kirby's a terrible head coach. Dabo's elite. All Kirby can do is recruit. Well, Dabo got outcoached by a terrible coach then. Because all the Clemson fans running around complaining about the play calling and the scheme and giving up on the running game. That wasn't the players' decision. Coaches. So Dabo got outcoached. This is a good win for Georgia. Any win over a top 4 team is good. You beat a top 4 team, that's a good win. So cry about it. That was a good win for Georgia. Ohio State, question mark. Now, they were 13.5-point favorites, and they covered. They won by 14. But they've got some issues, too. That defense at Ohio State worried me all year last year, and it's worrying me now, too. They give up a lot of big plays. They seem to have a problem covering receivers. It seems like a lot of receivers for opposing teams run wide open down the field. C.J. Stroud struggled early on. Maybe you expect that. Talking about a kid making his first ever start. Had never even thrown a pass in college. Has to open up on the road against a conference opponent in Minnesota that talent-wise can't compete with Ohio State, but they're very well coached. C.J. Stroud struggled early, sort of got it together in the second half. Look at Ohio State and Oklahoma. Which team are you more concerned about? I'd be more concerned about Oklahoma. I have a pretty good feeling Ohio State's going to get it together. We'll see. They play Oregon this week. Cincinnati. Boy, you better start paying attention to Cincinnati. They got Indiana and Notre Dame on the schedule. If they beat both those teams and end up 12-0 and win a conference championship game at 13-0, it's going to be hard to keep them out of the playoffs. They absolutely destroyed somebody this weekend, 45-0. They were 22-point favorites. They doubled that, and they're going to continue to do that week after week. That Cincinnati-Notre Dame game that's going to be the biggest game Cincinnati's ever played. Bigger than last year's New Year's Six game, because if Cincinnati keeps playing like they're playing now, and they beat Notre Dame, and Notre Dame ends up, God forbid Notre Dame ends up 11-4. What if Notre Dame ends up 11-1 and they're only lost to Cincinnati? Man, it's going to be hard to keep Cincinnati out of that playoff. I've said forever a group of 5 team won't get in the playoff. This is the best chance anybody's ever had. They're ranked 7th or 8th in the preseason polls. They're probably going to move up this week. North Carolina lost. Clemson lost. Oklahoma struggled. I don't know. We'll see. But it's time to at least seriously consider the possibility that they may find themselves in the college football playoff if they keep playing this way. They just look really, really good. I think the Penn State win was good. Look, you go on the road to a hostile environment in Wisconsin after the terrible season that Penn State had last year and everybody's doubting Penn State. You come out and you get a tough, hard-fought win on the road, hostile environment, first game of the year, conference game. I think that's a good win for Penn State. If for no other reason than for their confidence, right, after the struggles they had last year. And we got to give Texas some credit. At least half of my comment section over the last 2 weeks legitimately thought Texas was going to lose this game to Louisiana Lafayette. And Texas went out and manhandled them, dominated them. This game was never in doubt. It was never a threat for Louisiana to win this game. Texas went out there and did what they had to do. So you got to give them credit. Does that mean Texas is a top 10 team? I don't know. Does it mean they're going to challenge Oklahoma or Iowa State for the Big 12 title? I'm not jumping to any of those conclusions. I'm just saying Texas was only like a 6-point favorite in this game. They dominated. There was a lot of people who legitimately thought Texas would lose. They outperformed expectations, in my opinion, in week 1. You got to give Texas credit. Hell, I'm no Texas fan, but you got to give them credit. You know who else needs to start answering some questions? Dan Mullen. I thought he was supposed to be a quarterback guy. Why does Dan Mullen keep picking the wrong quarterback? Someone's going to have to explain this to me. For 2 years in a row, Dan Mullen started Felipe Franks over Kyle Trask. Not 1 year, but 2 years in a row. People forget the only reason Kyle Trask ever even started a game for Florida is because Felipe Franks got hurt in the middle of the season. Had it not been for that, we never would have seen Kyle Trask play. And now he's doing the same thing. He's hitched his wagon to Emily Jones in the same way that Scott Frost has hitched his wagon to Adrian Martinez. And Emily Jones is just not any good. And I've been saying this for 3 years. I haven't been a believer in Emory Jones from the day Florida signed him. And Emory Jones is a Georgia kid. I watched him play in high school. It's not that he's terrible. I just never thought he was going to be an elite-level college quarterback. And that proved to be the case in his first start this past weekend against something called FAU, where Florida got a miraculous win, 35-14, did not cover the spread either. And Emory Jones was only 17 of 27 for 113 yards against FAU. And you say, yeah, well, he ran for some yards. Yeah, he ran for some yards, 10 carries, 74 yards. He threw 1 touchdown, that's great, but he threw 2 interceptions. And then Anthony Richardson comes in to back up, who most people think is better than Emily Jones. Anthony Richardson comes in. Now, he was only 3 of 8 passing, so he didn't throw that much. 3 of 8 passing for 40 yards. But he had 7 carries for 110 yards and a touchdown and didn't throw any interceptions. And Dan Mullen comes out this week right on cue and says, nope, Emily Jones is still the starter. So I don't know what's going on down there with Florida, but to me, the offense didn't look that good. I thought they would beat FAU by 40. They were favored by 23. They won by 21, 35-14. I don't know what's going on with Dan Mullen and the quarterbacks. He's supposed to be a quarterback guy. Someone's going to have to explain it to me. I don't know. Who's the best teams in no particular order? Well, you already know. Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and yes, Georgia and Clemson, the C- Taters. Yes, the Taters are still one of the best teams. If you're ranked 4th and you lose to the 3rd best team, what does that mean? Does that mean that now you're not the 4th best team anymore? It was 10-3. Anybody could have won that game. Either team could have won that game. Either team. I don't see how anybody throws Clemson away. This idea that Clemson's going to go 9-3 now, but y'all are out of your mind. Clemson's not losing another game. There's nothing wrong with Clemson's offense. There's nothing wrong with Georgia's offense. These were 2 top 5 defenses playing in week 1. Georgia was without 4 of its top pass catchers and a starting safety. Clemson's offensive line just wasn't ready. It was too young. They were starting a freshman at left guard. The center didn't know what he was doing. Their offensive line just got ate up in this game, okay? This doesn't mean that Clemson is going 9-3. Clemson's going to score 40 points a game the rest of the way and blow out almost everybody they play. Same for Georgia. I don't understand how the level of basic and simple that you have to be to watch that game, knowing what you know about college football and go, well, that's it. Clemson's going 8-4, 9-3, and Georgia probably lose 3 games too, and both their offenses suck. The amount of stupid that you have to be to even type that out is beyond me. I don't understand. So, yes, those are still the best teams. Heisman Trophy candidates. Bryce Young, and Bryce Young. That's it for right now. That's it. Could Bryce Young become the first Alabama quarterback to ever win the Heisman? It's possible. If you voted today, he would win it. Of course, they don't vote today. It's only been 1 week. But he threw for almost 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Keep an eye on Matt Corral. He's going to put up ridiculous numbers too. I think Ole Miss is going to end up losing 2 or 3, maybe 4 games even, so he may lose himself out of the Heisman race. It's not really the best player. It's the best player on the best team award type of thing. But he's really good. Some people think he'll be the first quarterback taken in next year's draft, so, we'll see. But look, Clemson, you're a C- team, C- program, C- coaching in this game, and you toted the L from yours truly, Uncle Lou, and the Georgia Bulldogs. And it was funny too. I've been doing the whole C- troll thing since January. Calling Clemson a C- program. I had the hat with the C- on it. I've been blah 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 blah. Dabo Swinney comes out in the press conference after the game and referred to Clemson in this game as C-. Dabo, thank you for watching Uncle Lou every day like you're supposed to. Now, if you could just dry your tears and blow your nose, you'd be doing just fine. Have a good morning.